Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investments, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives to increase your wealth monetarily and educationally.
Hello folks, this is Fergus Hodgson. Thanks for tuning in to the Gold Newsletter Podcast. What a pleasure to be with you. It's a beautiful day here in Guatemala City, and I have an incredible man to speak with us, a free thinker and promoter of, his organization is called Social Evolution. His name is Max Borders. He is an author, entrepreneur. He's the executive director of this new organization, Social Evolution. He was the past editor of FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, and he also co-founded Voice and Exit, which is an incredible annual event in Austin, Texas, with all sorts of maybe innovative ideas. I'm not sure how you want to describe it. Max, do you want to take the lead there and explain Voice and Exit for us?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, Voice and Exit really is a way of getting people together to explore ideas at the frontiers along a number of dimensions in life, and it really runs the gamut of human experience. We have this mantra we use called "Criticize by Creating." And it really is about moving away from the acrimonious political environment to. I mean, I guess this is really, as I think about it, the first instantiation of this thinking for me is moving away from politics and moving into innovation and entrepreneurship, but along a number of dimensions of life. And Voice and Exit is an event that really celebrates that way of thinking, I guess you could say.
Well, I love it, mate. I mean, I've only been once, so maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I really enjoyed it, and so I highly recommend it if people can get there. So yeah, that's Voice and Exit. I'll put this on the show notes. Always go to goldnewsletter.com/podcast for the links. And so Max, he's had a long history. Well, I guess we've been working in similar fields for a long time, and I've just followed his evolution. But he has a new project which I wanted to explore today, and he's also just finished a book which I assume is on related material, but is not published yet. Do you want to comment on the status of your book?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, I was just going over edits this morning, working with an editor. All God's children need an editor, they say, and it's absolutely true in this case.
Sure.
Even though I'm an editor myself, one's work is always improved when someone gets multiple eyes on it. So that's the stage. The book is called, at least tentatively, The Social Singularity. And it really is about the kinds of content, the kinds of ideas that I'm working with on the nonprofit Social Evolution. And it was made possible by contributions to the nonprofit. So I'm delighted to have this be sort of like the manifesto for the organization, and really a way to get out there in terms of developing a set of ideas that are perhaps different from the way most people think, although perhaps not you. You and I think a lot alike, I think.
Well, yeah, the article I read, which I will share as well, is just welcome to Social Evolution. So one, that's the name of your organization, but two, there's this concept. I mean, we can get into social singularity and technological singularity because that was a term used in your article that I didn't understand. But first, Perhaps you want to just explain this premise, because when people hear social evolution, they'll just think, okay, well, society evolves, fine, but what's different about your evolution that you're promoting?
Well, and that's an interesting idea in the sense that I think there's a kind of stasis out there right now. There's a kind of old ways are sort of people have accreted around the old ways and remain in sort of mired in the status quo. And the kind of social evolution I'm talking about is catalyzed, which is to say we're not completely powerless in the face of this. In fact, there's a lot we can do about it, and we should. So yes, social change happens, or societal change, if you like, but we are meant to catalyze it. And one of the main ways we can catalyze societal change is through innovation and culture. Innovation, entrepreneurship, and culture. I think those are the three big ones.
I related to a lot of what was in this article, actually, because you referred to people fighting it out in the political world. And then there's this funny line which says, if you really care and you're the best and brightest. Maybe you go to a fine liberal arts college, you intern, and you eventually climb to the highest echelons of Capitol Hill. Politics, punditry, policy analysis. But then you realize that no one cares about your ideals, and you're playing a zero-sum game, and it's not terribly inspiring. So maybe you want to expand on that point. I assume, have you been through this lather, rinse, repeat process yourself?
Yes, I have. I mean, I've not been on Capitol Hill exactly, but I've certainly been in Washington, D.C., among the think tankers and the policy analysts, and it really is this kind of, it's difficult people have this bias that the only way to make change, positive social change, is through politics, policy, and punditry. So you meet a lot of these folks, and they're very happy to be there, but their contribution is, and not to disparage them, because again, I think you and I both to some degree have been among them, working in that capacity. But I've just come to think that politics is not the place to make social change. It's rather the place either to have your ideals destroyed or to be corrupted, and you can enter into a system in which you pay to play, or you play this zero or negative sum game. I think there are much more promising avenues of change out there, and I want to highlight those, and I want to help people, or I want to challenge people to reframe their thinking away from this political mindset and really push into this innovation mindset, because there are just so many possibilities in that mechanism of change. And I could give you examples.
Just one note on the policy world. You're right. We both have worked with think tanks, and I don't necessarily have animosity towards think tanks when I work with them. I just recognize the serious constraints on their capacity to make change. And there's a concept called the Overton Window, which I know you're familiar with, where think tankers basically only speak about policies or topics within a certain range, which I never really understood or appreciated, and I found it stifling. And it's tough, because as a young man, I wanted new ideas. I wanted to expand the range of discussion, and I fear that many think tanks are too afraid to do that, of course. It's just the way that the incentives at play. And so obviously you're not abiding by this restriction, and you want to catalyze changes outside maybe the coercive or top-down approach. You use this term subversive innovation. How is this different from just creative destruction, the term that many people know from economics?
It's different only in this. It's absolutely connected, but the difference is subversive innovation is a mindset. So creative destruction is not. It's a process. It's a macro process that happens over the course of the economy. We see change happen. We see buggy whips go away, and we see Model Ts roll off the assembly line. The buggy whip industry goes away. That's not really a conscious process unless you're Henry Ford, unless you have a vision and you say, I'm going to do something that eventually is going to make buggy whip industry go away. Subversive innovators, I think subversive innovation and those who practice it is a somewhat new phenomenon. And the most familiar, relatively recent example is probably Uber and Airbnb. So most of the time we have what we might call captured industries, or industries that are captured.
They have a cartel. They're cartelized.
They're cartelized, right. And most cartels exist because of captured regulators. And so, whether it's tax subsidies or regulations that benefit your industry or whatever the case, this kind of what economists call rent-seeking behavior is usually the thing that keeps things locked in place, where it's very difficult to compete with it. Well, everybody knows the story of Uber by now. Uber came in and operated in the legal gray areas and basically said, we're just going to do this. We're going to ask for forgiveness, not permission, and ended up asking for neither. They did it. They had massive constituencies using their product so suddenly that it was really difficult for the power players to do anything about it. And this is really, when you can turn your entrepreneurial lens or your innovation lens to this way of thinking, internetworking technologies, or how to disrupt an industry and really anticipate that through innovation and do it rapidly and get a lot of users onto your innovation rapidly, it's really, really difficult to fight this sort of change. And that is a couple of examples of what I mean by subversive innovation. And then, of course, one of the biggest and most profound, I think, is Bitcoin and the blockchain.
Do you want to rub elbows with the best minds in the precious metals and mining industry? You can on the Money, Metals, and Mining Cruise from May 28th to June 7th, 2018. Explore the jewels of the Mediterranean while discovering the latest strategies to successfully invest in precious metals and mining stocks. It's a perfect blend of adventure, learning, and luxurious leisure aboard the Crystal Serenity, always a popular destination. Cabins will sell out fast. Call cruise experts at 800-797-9519 to learn more, or visit our website, goldnewsletter.com/cruise.
Some of these innovations are maybe less, how can I put this, less sanitized or less acceptable. I think of Russ Albright, I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, and Silk Road, where in his case, I guess the state's capacity was sufficient to just shut that down. But will there just be 100 other Silk Roads to take its place?
Oh, there certainly are, and they do manage to find them, and they are peppered around the world in international sense. But as soon as one goes down, another comes up, and this is really the Hydra heads sprouting from this kind of thing. Whatever one thinks about the drug war, or the use of drugs or the purchase of drugs, or whatever side you're on, seems to be a process that's playing out. And I wouldn't say it's inevitable, but you'd have to get really draconian and really authoritarian in order to stop it. And this is one of those instances where, yeah, you might shut down Silk Road, but two more pop up in its place.
Yeah, it's the same as maybe prostitution, where it's a victimless crime. So you have to basically do stink raids, or you can't rely on the people to. There's no victim reporting the crime, so it's much more difficult to go after. Okay, and in your article you do mention prominently this role of cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin has been around since 2009. Where do you see the cracks in the establishment appearing if it's going to have this catalyzing effect?
Well, I think we're already seeing the cracks. It's very early in the life of this. I mean, if you can imagine the internet circa 1996, that's kind of where we are with cryptocurrencies, and there are a number of competitors. Each of these competitors has different properties and different things about it that people want or desire or value over other properties. And this competitive landscape is going to continue to get more interesting. It's evolving, as we say. So that we have so many people around the world who are bought into these, who are interested in them. Yes, there are regulators popping up in the United States with the SEC and in Asia threatening to shut down exchanges and threatening to ban these currencies. I do think it's a bit like the what is the game where you have a mallet and you hit the little heads that are trying to pop up.
No, I don't know this one, man. Is this an American game?
It must be a U.S. centric thing. But in any case, the idea there is that you squeeze the balloon on one side and it expands on the other side. It's really difficult to pop the entire balloon, and cryptocurrencies have this property. They'll have for a time the price will go down, reflecting some concerns from certain sectors of those who hold the currencies, and then sell because they're spooked by the regulatory environment. But I think the systems adapt. Not only the innovators, but for example, in China shut down a lot of their exchanges, and that affected the price. Went down for a while, and then all of a sudden there were these peer-to-peer exchanges online, completely anonymous, really, really difficult to do anything about, and they're functioning just fine. Price went back up. This this kind of adaptation among the users of cryptocurrencies globally across jurisdictions is going to be really, really difficult to stop. So that's the first point. But the second point is, in terms of the cracks, you've got these suddenly. I mean, the world is really in the thrall, I guess you could say, of these currencies, these national currencies that are inflationary, which is to say that the price of goods and services goes up and up and up every year for most people in those countries. And that's because they're inflating their currencies. They're manipulating the money supply for the sake of whatever their national goals are. Sometimes it's debt slavery. Sometimes it's this quote unquote stability. There are all kinds of reasons you might want to inflate a currency, and not all of them are bad. However, people do have choice in the matter now, whether they want an inflationary currency or a deflationary currency, where deflation means it could be that the value of your currency grows with time as you hold it, and so there are incentives to save. We can't, we, that is you and I, don't remember a time in our lives up to now when we could actually think about saving money and it increase in value rather than, or value and in purchasing power rather than decrease. And that is a whole new ballgame that really threatens the entire global financial system as we know it and the cronies it benefits.
Mate, it's a wonderful time to be alive. And there was an article which I published with the American Institute for Economic Research, I think on the weekend, and not by me, but by one of the contributors, about the problem with fractional reserve banking and how this could translate over to Bitcoin. And he was warning against using fractional systems with cryptocurrencies. And then someone made an interesting point that with cash, you really have a hard time holding large amounts of cash. It's not secure. And so you have to basically put it in a bank. No, you don't have to, but that's what a lot of people do. But
you can bury it in the yard.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, I guess. But the point was that with cryptocurrencies, you don't have to place it in any bank. You just have your own wallet, right? Mm-hmm. And so that really undermines the need for the conventional banking sector, or a lot of it, this conventional fractional reserve system. And I just thought that was perhaps a note that people haven't picked up on yet, that it's basically decentralizing banking even more than what we imagined before. And regarding people who are concerned about bans or regulation of cryptocurrencies, the truth is that already cryptocurrency use is de facto illegal or against tax laws, because you're supposed to pay taxes whenever you gain value. And I'm telling you, no one is paying these taxes. I mean, very, very few. So you're already working in a gray area that the IRS is aware of, but they don't know how to address, and they're kind of panicking right now. So I do agree that the capacity of states to crack down on cryptocurrencies is much less than I think people suggest. So, okay, now how is your organization, if we can focus on this organization called Social Evolution, and you're the executive director, how is it going to foster these forms of technology that have this subversive innovation capacity?
I think the short answer is media and culture. I mean, that's what I do. That's what you do. I feel like, I mean, this is not just a feeling. I think a lot of people agree with this, that since the 2009 white paper, there was a really early enthusiasm with respect to Bitcoin and subsequently some of the other efforts that have been made in this space. And I don't want to just focus entirely on cryptocurrencies and tokens, but these are good examples. There's a sense in which last year, especially 2017, was sort of token mania, ICO mania, and it was a lot of scammers and get rich quick schemes, and it seems to have lost its soul. So, and I would call that Satoshi's soul after Satoshi Nakamoto. I really want to build a culture and ethos around subversive innovation, remembering why Satoshi, who could be probably the richest person in the world, if you know, he or she cashed out their Bitcoin, but they really cared more about mission. They really cared about what they could do to fundamentally alter this global system that was rigged for the benefit of the few. And I don't want to sound like an Occupy Wall Street protester, but there's a large degree of truth to the idea that the financial institutions are in collusion with the federal government and the Federal Reserve in this sort of triangulation for the richest. And of course, when they failed, everybody had to bail them out. Wasn't just a U.S. phenomenon either. It bled into other central banking systems around the world, and we see it all the time. So this Satoshi soul, this way of looking at the world, where you're gonna actively look to try to underthrow instead of overthrow, but underthrow systems through subversive innovation, is honestly what I want to create in terms of a culture. These bright, talented people are out there making a ton of money, some of which could evaporate tomorrow because a lot of it is not valuable. If you have the ability to hack $500 million from one of these new exchanges or funds, then you also, for example, have the ability to create something of real value and think about how to underthrow power and profit from it. I really feel like a lot of people have lost their way, and I'm not trying to be a moralizer, just a moralizer, but really to help people remember that there is the liberation of humanity is at stake with all of this stuff, and we can start to think along these lines. It might not even be using innovation in the classic sense. For example, just like a bunch of coders, although they're my favorite because they have so many things that they can do at their disposal. There are also other ways to innovate that are just really sort of classic Clayton Christensen style disruption. Start a franchise of really inexpensive schools that are low profit or non-profit schools, and just outdo the public schools. There's a lot of people doing stuff like this in a couple of states, and it's working. And so this sort of subversive innovation can happen along all sorts of fronts. And before you know it, there's so many people who benefit from these new industries. It becomes exceedingly difficult to turn back the clock for the powers that be. It's not impossible, but the faster it happens, the more the evolutionary ecosystem emerges, the more we're going to see the underthrowing of power along a number of dimensions, and I'm very excited about that.
Mate, I'm excited too, Max. That's why I said we really do live in a wonderful era where the game is changing. And just in reference to your maybe observation of a different culture entering into the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency space, I do agree that when this was very new, obviously it attracted me and many other people because of its capacity as a change vehicle or an innovation vehicle for a broader impact. And then since then, the culture does seem to have changed into a get-rich-quick scheme for many people, and I'm still astounded at the market capitalizations of all these new cryptocurrencies. Okay, so you want to promote this positive culture or respect for this subversive innovation, and you referred to these two terms, technological singularity and social singularity. And I think social singularity is a tentative title to your book. Do you want to refer to what is this singularity?
Sure. The technological singularity is the first one. It's referred to often as just the singularity, the short version. And that's really the idea that processing power in computers is increasing rapidly through Moore's law. Gordon Moore was this guy who's working back in the 60s on computer processors. I think he was with Intel. And he basically said, look, I've noticed that about every 18 months we double our processing speed and power. So this seems to have gone through time more or less at a clip. Now, when you extrapolate that out into the future and you marry that with some machine learning, artificial intelligence, and automation, it starts to look pretty bad for people. It starts to look like the robots are going to become smarter than us and start to take our job. And everybody's heard about this. I mean, that's the short version. Of course, Ray Kurzweil. Well, I mean, and there are good reasons to be concerned, but I think the fears have been played up and overblown, particularly in popular media. And I think we need to have a balanced view of it. So one of the antidotes to that kind of thinking that I've tried to bring about, not just in what I hope is a future mechanism for ending politics as we know it, because I think some of the technologies we've been talking about have the potential to fundamentally restructure society around programmable incentives and the public ledger. But I also believe that that the how should we say that these same technologies will fundamentally restructure humanity such that we can keep up with the robots. We will become more like a hive mind in the way we operate. So that's the first thing. Now, there's no doubt the robots are going to do things better. They can already play chess better. They can already do the game Go better. And in automation, they're automating industries. The robots are working in car factories now, left and right, and that's created a churn of jobs. It's a removal of labor and capital from certain industries. But that labor and capital doesn't just sit and do nothing. It migrates. And that's where entrepreneurship and innovation comes in. We will start, I believe, to see profound abundance because of this low-cost, really smart production capabilities where you're reducing competitive environment, reducing production costs for goods, certainly, and also perhaps services. But that labor and capital is going to migrate somewhere, and where it's going to migrate are a lot these much more human industries, which I call, following this guy Joseph Pine, the experience economy. I believe we're going to rediscover our humanity in a lot of interesting ways, and a lot of what we think are mere goods and services are going to have this experiential touch. You think about the way, for example, you live your life. I think you're now based in Guatemala, and your show's Antigua, right? Something about Antigua. You live now, and I think a lot of people are starting to live for experiences, for memories, for missions. We don't really care as much about stuff anymore, and there's nothing wrong with stuff. Stuff, in a certain sense, makes the world go round.
That's the truth, Max, right? Because a few years ago, I realized that things like long-term contracts or possessions just got in the way of my lifestyle. So
yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and I think the more we live in a condition of superabundance, this condition where it's really easy to get, food and clothing and basic needs met and computers to talk on, and that we're gonna crave more experiences, and experiences very often require other human beings to provide. We can imagine everything from these crazy panic room things where they lock you in a room in these cool environments and you try to get out as a kind of an adventure scenario. These are designed and manned by human beings. I mean, we can imagine AIs running them, but certainly there's just countless new industries that we haven't yet foreseen or imagined that are going to be about creating experiences for other people. And the difference between human beings and artificial intelligence, at least right now, is that human beings are conscious. We have the capacity to care. We have motivations. We have passions. And those passions are things that are part and parcel to being human that we want to absolutely milk in our lifetimes. So as we migrate people into the experience economy from other kinds of jobs that might have been in manufacturing or might have been in warehousing, we're going to see our humanity return. We're going to see the return of community. We're going to see the return of handicrafts that are unique. And we're going to see stuff as simple as like, hey man, I need my house cleaner, my back rubbed in the gig economy. That this becomes a much more robust thing that we need humans to do. And again, we can admire robots. We can imagine robots rubbing our backs. But there's a sense in which we like people, and we want people because we are people, and that's not likely to completely go away. So just a failure of imagination in what future industries can emerge that are more human industries is really what's holding us back with respect to this fear and almost like just abject terror about what AI is going to do, because AI is going to be our friend for a very long time, and the point at which it could put us out of every single job is the point at which we are going to merge with it anyway.
Just one comment or one final question.
Mm-hmm.
You referred to this hive mind, and I know that's another term that will be maybe people will be less familiar with. Do you want to just explain why that's such a positive thing in your mind, what it is and why you're promoting it?
Sure. It sounds like it's something crazy or something bizarre, like people in the Borg. But my friend Justin Goro, a South African developer, has this concept that he dropped on me in one of his articles, and I quite love it, called programmable incentives. If you think about the blockchain, what it represents, particularly with the start of Ethereum as a blockchain, it really is about programmable incentives. It's about introducing economics, not as an instantiated ecosystem of people's behaviors. So that direct peer-to-peer connection with other people who are paying you to do things in real time, or adjusting your incentives in certain kinds of ways, has profound implications, particularly when we think about disintermediation. That's a big word, but it really just means removing middlemen. The more we remove middlemen and we create incentives to do stuff with each other in peer-to-peer fashion, the more we're going to start to be able to collaborate on massive scales internationally, not just with markets. Markets are a kind of hive mind. They're a kind of collective intelligence, and we shouldn't discount the simple power of the market price. The market price is an incentive, knowledge wrapped in an incentive. It says, hey, this thing is cheaper than it was. You want this thing, right? Hey, come buy it, right? That's an incentive. But once you can begin to program incentives through the blockchain, the kinds of things that we thought of as being, for example, public goods, no longer need to be public goods. We could have tokenize, for example, a mission to Mars, or we could tokenize entire cities where people all over the world have vested interest in the positive outcome in the services and goods provided in cities. For example, streets and street lamps and police protection and security. All of these things can be distributed investments all over the world, sort of like investments, but also participatory in the peer-to-peer sense. So the way we think about and work on problems is going to fundamentally change, which is going to allow us to catch up with AI in certain respects, because we have the benefit of multiple minds united for similar goals.
Roger that. Now, look, mate, I'm eager to get behind this cause, and I'm sure there are many fellow travelers listening. So why don't you tell people how they can support your organization? I know they can donate cryptocurrencies, but aside from donating, where should they go, or what should they do to support this mission? Well,
I mean, the first thing that if anyone wants to do, support financially, obviously we're open to that, because we run on a shoestring right now. This is what I'm calling my lean year. I'm getting my message out, getting the book out. I'm going to do a tour, just start to shout this stuff from the rooftops, because I believe this is really the way we're gonna get around this dead weight that is the regulatory state and its cronies. But second, I think if the mission means something to you, follow us, engage with us, like our stuff, share our stuff, and we'd love to have people who are bright writers come aboard and start writing for social evolution. I have a vision of our publication being staffed with writers around the world, sort of like Bitcoin core developers. They're working all over the world in voluntary capacity to really further this mission and vision to a point that it reaches a tipping point and people sort of take it for granted, and then I can, I guess, retire. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for any kind of help and good ideas. I don't know anything. I'm just one guy. Let's get the Hive Mind working.
Well, the website is social-evolution.com. And the article, which I will share in the podcast archive, is Welcome to Social Evolution. That's on medium.com. Max, it's inspiring to speak with you, of course. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to being in touch, okay?
I can't thank you enough. It was my pleasure.